There's something they never tell you about the people who prefer to be alone. They don't tell you that solitude isn't loneliness. They don't tell you that choosing your own company over a crowded room isn't something to fix or apologize for. And they definitely don't tell you that the very thing people have probably questioned about you your whole life might actually be one of the most powerful things about you. If you're someone who genuinely enjoys spending time alone, who recharges in silence, who sometimes turns down plans not because you're sad or antisocial, but because being by yourself just feels right, then this video is for you. Because what most people call being a loner or keeping to yourself, psychology calls something very different. And today, we're going to talk about what it actually says about who you are. These are 5 rare traits that people who prefer solitude almost always share. And by the end of this, I think you'll see yourself in a completely different light. Number 1. You have an unusually deep inner world. Most people need external noise to feel okay. They fill silence with music, with scrolling, with conversation, with anything that keeps them from being alone with their own thoughts. But you? You don't just tolerate silence, you actually live inside it comfortably. And that is not nothing. That is genuinely rare. Psychology shows that people who are comfortable with solitude tend to have a much richer and more developed inner life than average. They think in layers. They reflect on experiences rather than just moving past them. They process emotions more thoroughly, they ask themselves harder questions, and they often arrive at deeper understandings about themselves and the world around them. Think about it this way. When you're alone, what actually happens in your mind? For most solitude seekers, it's not emptiness. It's almost the opposite. There are ideas forming, memories being revisited, feelings being untangled, questions being turned over slowly like stones in your hand. You are constantly thinking, noticing, and making sense of things in a way that people who always need company simply never get the chance to do. Research indicates that this kind of deep inner processing is strongly linked to creativity, emotional intelligence, and self-awareness. The people who change things, who create things, who understand things, they are almost always the ones who spent a lot of time alone with their thoughts. So the next time someone implies that you think too much, or that you're too in your head, understand what they're actually saying. They're telling you that your mind is more active than theirs. And that's not a problem, that's a gift. Number 2, you have a high level of self-awareness. Here's something that takes most people decades to develop, if they ever develop it at all. The ability to actually know yourself. Not the version of you that performs for other people, not the you that shows up at parties or in group chats, but the real, unfiltered, honest version of who you are, what you value, what drains you, what lights you up, and what you actually want from your life. People who prefer solitude tend to develop this kind of self-awareness early and deeply. Because when you spend real, consistent time with yourself, you can't hide from yourself forever. You get to know your patterns. You notice when something feels off. You start to understand your own emotional triggers, your own needs, your own non-negotiables. And that knowledge becomes a kind of compass that most people don't have access to. Psychology shows that self-awareness is one of the strongest predictors of mental and emotional well-being. People who know themselves well make better decisions, build more authentic relationships, and experience less of the kind of anxiety that comes from living a life that doesn't actually fit who you are. Think about someone you know who always needs to be around people, who seems uncomfortable the moment things go quiet. Often, there's an avoidance happening there, a running away from something they don't want to face inside themselves. But you've never really had that problem, have you? Because you've sat with yourself. You've done the uncomfortable work of being honest about who you are. And even when that's been hard, it's made you someone who is genuinely, deeply grounded. That groundedness is one of the rarest qualities a person can have, and solitude is a huge part of how you built it. Number 3. You value quality over quantity in everything, especially relationships. This one might be the most misunderstood thing about people who prefer to be alone. It's not that you don't like people. It's not that you're cold or disconnected or incapable of closeness. It's that your standards for connection are simply higher than most. And when you do let someone in, you let them in completely. Research indicates that solitude seekers tend to invest deeply in a small number of relationships rather than spreading themselves across many surface-level ones. They are the kind of friends who actually remember what you told them 3 months ago, the kind of partners who are genuinely present, the kind of people who, when they care about you, make you feel it in a way that most friendships never quite reach. But here's the thing, that depth requires energy, real, focused, emotional energy. And because you understand that about yourself, you're careful about who you give it to. You'd rather have 1 or 2 people who truly know you than 20 people who only know your name. And in a world that constantly celebrates having the biggest social circle, that kind of discernment is almost countercultural. But it's also incredibly wise. Think about the relationships in your life that have felt truly real, the conversations that went somewhere honest, the moments of connection that actually meant something. Those didn't happen in a crowd. They happened one-on-one, in quiet spaces, with people who were willing to slow down enough to actually see you. You've always known how to create those moments, because you've always known that real connection isn't about volume, it's about depth. Number 4. You are deeply intuitive. This one surprises people when they hear it, but it makes complete sense once you understand why. Intuition is not magic. It's pattern recognition. It's your brain picking up on subtle signals, inconsistencies, emotional undercurrents, things that don't quite add up, and synthesizing all of that into a feeling, a knowing. And the people who are best at it are almost always the ones who spend a lot of time in quiet observation rather than constant social performance. Psychology shows that people who regularly practice solitude develop a heightened sensitivity to their environment and to other people. Because when you're not constantly performing or reacting, you get to watch. You notice the way someone's voice changes when they're uncomfortable. You pick up on the energy in a room before anyone else has named it. You often know things about a situation before you can fully explain how you know them. And more often than not, you're right. This is your intuition, and it's been sharpened by years of paying attention in silence while the world around you kept moving. There's a reason why some of the greatest thinkers, writers, therapists, and leaders throughout history were people who spent enormous amounts of time alone. It wasn't a weakness they overcame. It was a practice that made them sharper, more perceptive, more able to see what others missed. Your preference for solitude has been doing the same thing for you all along. It's been building in you a kind of quiet intelligence that most people will never fully develop. And that intelligence shows up every time you trust your gut, every time you read between the lines, every time you sense something true before it's been spoken out loud. Number 5. You have an extraordinary capacity for independence. There's a kind of freedom that only develops in people who have learned to be okay alone. Not just okay, actually. Good. Content. Sometimes even deeply happy. And it produces a quality of independence that is hard to manufacture any other way. Research indicates that people who are comfortable with solitude are significantly less likely to make decisions out of fear of being alone, less likely to stay in situations that aren't right for them out of a need for company, and more likely to build lives that genuinely reflect what they want, rather than what they thought they were supposed to want. Think about how many people around you are in relationships they've outgrown, staying in jobs that don't fit, or going along with things that don't feel right, simply because they can't tolerate being without the noise and the company and the external validation. That's not a judgment, it's just a reality. Most people have never really learned to be alone, and so they arrange their entire lives around avoiding it. But you're different. You know yourself well enough to know when something is right and when it isn't. You're not so desperate for connection that you'll take any version of it just to not be alone. And that means the choices you make, the people you choose, the life you build, they tend to be more intentional, more yours, more honest. That is one of the most underrated forms of strength a person can have. And it comes directly from your willingness to spend time in your own company, to get comfortable there, and to stop needing the world's constant presence to feel like you're enough. So let's bring this together. If you're someone who prefers to be alone, you are not broken. You are not antisocial. You are not missing something that everyone else has. What you have, what you've quietly been building this whole time, is a rich inner world that most people never develop. A level of self-awareness that takes others a lifetime to reach, if they reach it at all. A capacity for deep, genuine connection that goes far beyond what surface-level socializing ever could. An intuition that picks up on what others overlook. and an independence that means your life belongs to you in a way that is genuinely rare. Solitude isn't absence. It isn't emptiness. For you, it's where you go to become more of who you already are. And I want to leave you with this. There will always be people who misunderstand your need for space, who take your quietness personally, or push you to be something louder. But the version of you that sits comfortably in your own company, that chooses depth over noise, that has built a life from the inside out, that version doesn't need to be fixed. That version is the whole point. If this resonated with you, if some part of what you heard today felt like finally being understood, please consider subscribing. We make videos like this one regularly, exploring the hidden strengths behind the traits that the world so often gets wrong. You found something real here, and there's a lot more where this came from.